The room felt refrigerated, like someone had dialed the air down to stun emotion. Stephanie sat across from me, fresh-laced blazer, teeth like a press release, flipping pages as if my life were a quarterly appendix. She didn't offer water. She didn't say hello. "Let's discuss optimization," she began, and the word landed like a stapler to the temple. I'd given this place 28 years of uptime and triage. Now I was a line item with legs. I didn't argue. Old sailors know when you're already in the rip current. I shut my laptop with the kind of gentleness that makes people nervous, slid it to the edge of the table, and placed a tiny metal USB next to it. Empty drive. No data. Just a glinting little shell casing on a maple surface. My way of saying I don't fire wildly. I pick targets. Stephanie kept talking. Agile. Transformational. Future forward. Phrases that work well in investor decks and not so well in server rooms at 3 a.m. Her smile never touched her eyes. She mentioned realignment, and a printed folder appeared in her manicured hands like a summons. Around us, the glass-walled conference room reflected a dozen polite statues pretending not to hear. A manager cleared his throat. Someone fumbled with a pen. I caught my own reflection in the glass. 53, crow's feet carved by fluorescent light and bad coffee, jaw set by 1,000 production incidents. Then let it go. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" she asked, already half-turned toward the door. There was, but not to her. I picked up the folder she was offering like it might bite, slid it under my arm, and stood. No grand slap on the table. No speech about loyalty or sacrifice. Those are coins you only spend once, and I'd spent them long ago, back when the company still smelled like solder and takeout. As I reached for the handle, I glanced at the team photo tacked outside. 20 faces under harsh office lighting, eyes red from late nights, all of us too tired to fake smiles longer than the shutter click. I'd hired half of them. I'd argued raises when finance wanted to cut bodies, trained rookies until they could build alone, defended outages with my name when it should have been someone else's. The hallway noise swelled. Someone laughing too hard in sales, a copier humming, footsteps with places to be, and then swallowed me whole. I passed HR, the same woman who once asked if I'd mentor her nephew fresh out of college. She lifted a hand, thought better of it, let it fall. The silence that followed me into the elevator wasn't empty. It was heavy. You can weigh silence like you weigh steel. Outside, the city had the clean, metallic shine of a weekday morning. I turned away from the parking garage by habit and walked 2 blocks to Murphy's, a diner that refuses to know the century. The doorbell chimed, and the smell, burnt coffee, grease that's seen presidents come and go, hit me like a memory I hadn't asked for. I slid into a red vinyl booth that stuck a little to my shirt and ordered black coffee from Teresa, who's been calling me Han since we both had less gray. I didn't rage. Rage is a loud engine that eats fuel you'll need later. I let the mug warm my hands and traced circles on the condensation ring. 28 years is a long time to call any place home, even if home is fluorescent lit and windowless. My brain, stubborn and useful, started laying out a whiteboard in my head. 3 columns. Legal, technical, perception. Every plan worth a damn lives at the intersection of those. Legal. A dusted word in most shops, but not to me. My name doesn't appear on the company org chart anymore, but it does live in places that matter. I'd learned early that you document the things people forget and lock the things they might try to take. Back when we were 5 rows of folding desks in a former warehouse, an old Navy buddy named Tony, turned IP attorney, taught me that talent bleeds if paper doesn't clot. File under your name while the chaos is loud, he'd said, and assign it when they remember their manners. He was right about the chaos, wrong about the manners. Technical, my cathedral. The architecture we built isn't a single brick. It's a keystone. Pull it and the arch still stands for a moment. Then forces remember physics. The core engine breathes prime number rhythms and handshake choreography only a few of us could hear. I know where the skeleton is stitched to the muscle. Not because I'm clever. Because I was there when the tendons were tied. Perception, the wild card. Markets, boards, agencies, they don't buy code. They buy trust. You can't fake trust with a sizzle reel and some stock footage of satellite dishes. You borrow it from people like me until you forget you never owned it. That borrowing has a return date. Sometimes it's stamped in ink. Sometimes it's stamped in blood. Teresa topped me off. You look like someone canceled Christmas, she said. Just the fiscal year, I said, which made her laugh in a way that sounded like a cough. I took out my pocket notebook, paper, because encryption can't beat a lit match, and drew the 3 columns. Under legal, I wrote 2008 provisional. Check reversion clause timing. Confirm without cause. Under technical, watermark lineage, non-destructive proof of origin. Under perception, silence is strategy. Time the reveal. Who needs to know when and why? Then I wrote 24 hours across the page, big enough to bruise through to the next sheet. People think revenge is noisy, that it arrives with a parade and a neon sign and a marching band that spells HHA across the end zone. That's for teenagers and internet comments. Real correction, the kind that endures, moves like a submarine, deep, slow, almost undetectable until the depth charge goes off under your keel. I paid cash, no digital exhaust today, and stepped back into the light. The city felt brighter than it had any right to be. I walked 3 blocks the wrong way, a trick I learned after we got our first defense audit. Distance shifts perspective. By the time a cab rolled to the curb, I'd rehearsed my first 3 calls and decided to make none of them yet. Home smelled like old leather and dog food and the faint electric dust of a house that holds its breath. Rex raised his head, thumped his tail once, then twice, like he knew I had stories I wasn't ready to say out loud. I set the folder on the kitchen table, poured 3 fingers of bourbon I save for when something ends or begins, and opened a drawer I hadn't opened in years. The manila envelope was there where I'd left it, snug between tax returns and warranties for appliances that have already died with dignity. No label. Didn't need one. The weight told you what was inside. There's a moment when you peel back an old notary seal and the paper sighs. It sounds like a door you forgot you locked finally swinging open. My name sat at the top of the provisional, black ink that hadn't faded. Not the company's. Mine. Tony's notes in the margin were tiny and neat, little guardrails from a younger war. I took photos, signed a fresh digital attestation, stored copies on an external drive, and in a vault I pay good money for in a cloud people swear is safe. The safe because I understand the locks. I should have called Tony right then. Instead, I went to the hall closet I ignore unless I need winter or regret. Top shelf. Banker's box with a sharpest scrawl, original IP personal. I carried it to the floor and sat cross-legged like I used to in cramped comms rooms, elbows on knees, spine arguing with history. Pages smelled like dust and old coffee. My handwriting from 2008 looked cocky in a way I don't let myself be anymore. A set of annotated diagrams fell out. A handshake protocol I'd nicknamed Rex long before I had a dog. Some nights the only joke you have is the one you write into the margins. You can't fake provenance. Not really. You can obscure it, drown it in committees and innovation hubs, wrap it in branding, but math leaves footprints. Years ago, when we were hardening the core, I stitched a non-destructive signature into the code path. Nothing malicious, nothing that could be called sabotage. Just a repeating prime rhythm in the noise, a watermark only visible if you knew how to light it. It was legal. It was mine. It would testify without me testifying. The clock over the stove clicked 1 minute forward. I poured the bourbon back into the glass and let it go warm. The phone buzzed, and a message preview slid across the lock screen from a number I didn't save. Exit survey, rate your separation experience. The corner of my mouth twitched. Somewhere downtown, they were probably congratulating each other on a clean transition. Clean is a word people use when they don't test for residue. I opened a new email, addressed it to Tony, and wrote a subject line I hoped we'd never need. Need verification on reversion clause, time critical. I attached scans, highlighted the line that mattered, and asked one question. Still operative upon involuntary termination without cause? Hover. Send. The only sound was Rex hopping off his bed and laying his head on my foot, a weight I didn't know I needed. While I waited for Colorado to wake up, I opened my notebook again and drew a tiny square next to perception. Inside it, I wrote no grandstanding. Then another square, no lawsuits. Yet. Then a third. Let them read their own reflection. I closed the book and set it beside the empty USB on the table. One was a decoy, the other was a map. The house held still. My phone lit once, twice, then rang, the screen filling with Tony's name. I took a breath and swiped. "Tell me it's alive," I said. He didn't answer right away. Paper rustled. Glasses clicked. The soft music of a man who doesn't bluff. "If they let you go without cause yesterday," he said finally, voice even, "the clause wakes up today. Full reversion, Tom. It's yours." The bourbon didn't taste like victory. Tasted like oxygen. "Then the clock's running," I said. "And it's loud," he replied. I looked at the empty USB, at the folder, at the box that had waited a decade for morning. "Good," I said. "Let them hear it just in time to realize it's not thunder." Rex thumped his tail, and somewhere in the city, a projector warmed up for a demo it wasn't allowed to give. Sunlight barely cracked through the blinds when I sat down at my desk the next morning. My computer hummed like an old soldier waking up for one last mission. The clock read 6:12 a.m., and somewhere in the back of my head, I could already hear Tony's voice from the night before. Calm, precise, surgical. "Full reversion, Tom. It's yours. Mine." 2 syllables that felt heavier than the whole 28 years I'd spent under someone else's logo. I logged into the USPTO filing portal, the same sterile interface I'd first touched back in 2008. My fingers hesitated on the keyboard just once. I wasn't angry. I was steady. In my world, precision was the only form of revenge that mattered. I uploaded the notarized scans, verified the hash signatures, and checked the box labeled involuntary termination, without cause. The page refreshed, time-stamped in government gray, 6 hours 27 minutes and 49 seconds. That was the sound of a kingdom quietly changing hands. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I pulled out my notebook and drew 3 circles. Legal, technical, perception. In the middle, I wrote one word: timing. I had 24 hours before the change propagated through every public database, before anyone at TechFlow would even notice the walls shifting beneath their feet. They'd probably be prepping their big Pentagon demo, the one I'd built the foundation for. I could almost picture them rehearsing talking points about next-gen encryption and proprietary frameworks. All those fancy words built on the bones of my code. That's when I remembered the watermark. My signature inside the architecture. 3 interlaced prime intervals coded deep in the entropy generator. Impossible to remove, invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. I opened my old development terminal, entered a few commands, and watched as the sequence danced across the screen. 71-97-113. The rhythm of my own fingerprint. The system didn't care about titles or org charts. It knew who wrote it. I encrypted the verification log, stored it in 3 places: local drive, external SSD, and a cloud vault registered under an alias Tony helped me set up years ago. Then, for good measure, I printed 1 physical copy and slid it into a brown envelope labeled Legacy Key. Rex watched me from the corner, ears perked. He had that look again, the one that said, "Something's different, old man." "You're not wrong," I told him. "But I'm not burning the house down. Just locking the doors before they notice they left the keys inside." At 7:45, my inbox pinged. USPTO confirmation. Reversion complete. A legal heartbeat echoed through the kitchen. Quiet. Final. Across town, TechFlow's headquarters was waking up. Stephanie was probably sipping a triple-shot macchiato, wearing that victory smile she'd practiced in the mirror. Her team would be finalizing slide decks, checking demo servers, bragging about the new architecture that didn't belong to them anymore. I took another sip of coffee, black, no sugar. There's a clarity that only bitterness brings. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Paul, my old teammate. "Paul, morning, Tom. Weird question, you didn't happen to encrypt any of the old framework files with a watermark or signature, did you?" "Me? Why do you ask?" "Paul. Legal's been cross-referencing assets before the demo, and something flagged as non-verified origin. Stephanie said it's probably a bug. Me, it's not a bug. I hit send, then placed the phone face down. Let that seed sprout on its own. By 10:15, Tony called again. I just reviewed the registry logs, he said. Public propagation within the hour. Once it hits, their entire IP claim collapses. You're sitting on a live grenade. Good, I replied. Let them juggle it. Tom, he warned. You're playing this close to the line. They'll try to spin it. Say it was clerical error, legacy paperwork. That's fine. I cut in. I have proof. The clause, the filings, the audit trail. I even have the digital watermark. If they touch that code again after 11 a.m., it's willful infringement. He exhaled, long and low. You always were the quiet kind of dangerous. Dangerous, I said, is leaving me underestimated. When the clock hit 11 o'clock, I refreshed the USPTO public database. There it was, patent hashtag 8 for 72, 639, owner, Thomas J. Caldwell. Just like that, 28 years of servitude became leverage. They didn't own the core anymore. I did. I opened a secure folder on my desktop and drafted 3 documents. Reversion notice, official copy. Timestamped. Signed by both the USPTO and Tony's firm. Proof of origin cryptographic watermark log. Encrypted with a rotating 4096-bit key. Stored hash on the blockchain because poetic justice should be permanent. Fail-safe trigger. Dead man's switch. Automated release email set to deliver all evidence to 3 major defense contractors and 1 investigative journalist if I didn't manually cancel within 48 hours. Call it insurance. Call it conscience. I call it structure. I stood up, cracked my neck, and poured another round of coffee. The smell of roasted defiance filled the kitchen. At 11:37, my phone buzzed again. Same number. Paul. Tom, I just looked at the patent database. Holy hell, your name's on it. Me, yeah. It reverted this morning. Paul. Stephanie's gonna lose it. Me, she already did. She just doesn't know it yet. I could almost hear him swallow through the text bubbles. Across town, the first domino fell. An intern in legal, probably some kid named Austin or Preston, cross-checked the patent registry and froze. I imagined the exact moment. His eyes widening, cursor hovering over my name. The slow dread of realizing he'd stumbled into a corporate landmine. He'd forward it to his supervisor with a line like, possible discrepancy. Please advise. By the time legal confirmed it wasn't a glitch, the Pentagon's liaison was already en route for the final pre-demo briefing. Stephanie wouldn't stop the show. She'd double down. That was her nature. Shine brighter. Talk faster. Drown the smoke with more light. I didn't need to lift a finger. The gravity was already doing the work. At 1 p.m., Tony sent one last message. You sure you want to let this play out publicly? I typed back. They chose the stage. I'm just turning on the lights. Then I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. That low mechanical pulse that sounds almost like applause if you've been waiting long enough. Somewhere downtown, a projector was warming up for a demo that would never finish. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a cog. I felt like gravity. By the time I reached the end of my second cup of coffee, the storm had already started brewing downtown. You could feel it in the static hum of the city, that invisible ripple right before something important breaks. At 2:08 p.m., my phone lit up with a call I didn't expect. General William Stone, founder, mentor, ghost of the company's original soul. I stared at the screen for a full ring before answering. Tom, he said, his voice still carrying that military gravel. I just got an alert from the patent office. I didn't reply. Let him take the next step. It lists you as the owner of TechFlow's encryption core. That can't be right. It's right, I said evenly. Always was. The formal transfer was never completed. Silence stretched across the line, filled only by faint ranch noises, wind, maybe a horse somewhere. Then a low exhale. Jesus Christ. Do they know? They will. Probably in about an hour. He didn't argue, didn't deny. The old man wasn't built for boardroom spin. You're not doing this out of spite, are you? He asked. No, I said. Out of accuracy. Another pause. Stephanie made a mistake firing you, he muttered. She doesn't understand the difference between optics and structure. She understands one thing now, I said. Structure owns optics. He grunted, maybe half laugh, half respect. What are you going to do? Nothing dramatic. Just let the legal clock run. He sighed, and the line went dead. Typical Bill, never goodbye, just silence loaded with meaning. By 3:15, my phone started vibrating like it owed someone money. First, messages from ex-coworkers. Hey, Tom, what's happening? Stephanie's in a meeting with legal. Looks bad. They're saying your name's showing up on everything. You didn't really take the patent back, did you? I didn't reply to any of them. The plan worked better when people filled the silence themselves. Meanwhile, somewhere in the legal wing, panic had switched from whisper to wildfire. I could imagine it clearly. Some intern sprinting down a hallway, a paralegal muttering, "Oh my God," and Stephanie pacing with her arms crossed like she could intimidate a problem into submission. Someone in legal probably tried to convince her to postpone the demo. Just a precaution, they'd say. We can clarify the ownership issue first. But Stephanie? No. She'd bet her career on swagger, and swagger doesn't know when to shut up. She'd say something like, "We've always owned that code. It's a paperwork glitch." And when they hesitated, she'd double down. Do the demo. We'll clean it up later. That was her fatal flaw, mistaking confidence for control. Around 5 p.m., I took Rex for a walk. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. The sky over Arlington turned copper, that end-of-day glow that feels like both a warning and a reward. My phone buzzed again. Paul, Stephanie's ignoring legal. The demo's still on for tomorrow morning. Pentagon officials confirmed attendance. Me, then you might want to bring popcorn. Rex barked once like he agreed. Morning came faster than I expected. Demo day. The sun hadn't fully risen when I stood at my window, watching the skyline burn gold. TechFlow's headquarters sat somewhere beyond that horizon. 40 floors of glass, arrogance, and nervous caffeine. I wasn't there in person. Didn't need to be. The truth travels faster than any elevator. At 9:42 a.m., a push notification hit my feed. TechFlow unveils next-gen encryption at exclusive defense demo. Attached was a livestream link. I clicked. The camera panned across a high-end conference center. Brushed steel, backlit walls, and the kind of rehearsed energy you can smell through the screen. Stephanie stood center stage in a navy suit, every strand of hair calibrated for victory. Behind her, a massive LED wall pulsed with the words, "Next Gen IS now." She smiled at the crowd. Pentagon liaisons, defense contractors, tech reporters, all the gatekeepers of credibility, and began her speech. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to see will redefine military-grade communication security. Her voice was smooth, too smooth, the kind of tone that sells snake oil and IPOs. She motioned to a junior engineer who loaded the live demo onto the big screen. The UI I built, every gradient, every sequence, every algorithmic breath, flickered to life. And then it happened. Stage right. A woman in a dark gray blazer, legal, stepped forward. She whispered something into Stephanie's ear. You could see the blood drain from her face even through the 1080p stream. She tried to laugh it off, said something like, "A small technical delay," but the microphone was still hot. The crowd heard every word of what came next. "What do you mean we can't demo it? We don't own the patent anymore, Stephanie. What are you talking about? It reverted to Caldwell. Yesterday. It's public record." A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. Cameras zoomed in. Phones went up. Screenshots were already halfway around the internet before she even took a breath. Someone from the Pentagon front row stood and held up a printed document. Patent hashtag 8. 472-639 owner. Thomas J. Caldwell. Public record. My name. My code. My victory. Stephanie tried to recover, to smooth-talk her way through it. "This is clearly a misunderstanding," she said, forcing a brittle smile. We'll clarify ownership after the presentation. But there was no presentation left. The audience was already standing, whispering to each other, passing around copies of the filing. The demo screen froze mid-animation, the cursor blinking like a pulse monitor flatlining. I sat back in my chair and sipped coffee. Didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Just watched the inevitable play out exactly as designed. At 10:31 a.m., my phone lit up again. Paul calling. I answered. "You're not going to believe this," he said breathlessly. Half the board just walked out. Legal's melting down. Stephanie's locked in a side room with security. "I believe it," I said. "Tell them not to touch the system until they have a license in writing." "Tom, what happens now?" "Now?" I said quietly. "Now they learn about gravity." He didn't respond, but I heard it. That moment of understanding when a man realizes the ground beneath him isn't solid anymore. I hung up. Across town, the glass tower that once felt untouchable was crumbling in the court of public record. No explosions. No lawsuits yet. Just the quiet implosion of arrogance under the weight of law. Somewhere inside that building, Stephanie was staring at her reflection in a black screen, realizing for the first time that optimization had an unexpected variable, me. And this time she couldn't rebrand her way out of it. I woke up the next morning to a silence that felt earned. No alarms. No meetings. No Slack pings from 20-somethings who'd just discovered the word synergy. Just sunlight crawling across the floorboards and Rex snoring softly against my leg. Then the phone started buzzing. Once, twice, and then endlessly. 203 missed calls. My inbox looked like a battlefield. Subject lines screamed. Urgent. Need clarification on IP status. Tom, please call me. Pentagon postponing contract pending ownership review. And then one from Bill Stone, timestamped 3:17 a.m. We need to talk. I didn't rush. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, poured it into the same chipped navy mug I'd been using since '98, and sat down at my kitchen table. The same spot where this whole storm had started 48 hours ago. The news channels were already covering it. TechFlow demo collapses amid patent scandal. A talking head was explaining how a clerical oversight had caused a major defense contractor's entire encryption framework to revert to its original inventor. My photo flashed on screen, an old company headshot where I still had hope in my eyes. Unbelievable, the anchor said. One man's forgotten signature has the potential to cost TechFlow hundreds of millions. Forgotten signature. That's what they called 28 years of sweat. At 8:05 a.m., the phone rang again. Bill. Morning, General, I answered. Tom, he barked. What the hell do you want? Not an apology. Not a negotiation opener. Just pure, unfiltered survival mode. I took a slow sip of coffee. Depends what you mean by want. He exhaled through his nose. You've got them cornered. Stephanie's done. The board's in emergency session. I've got senators calling me asking if our systems are compromised. They're not compromised, I said. They're just misplaced. Damn it, Tom. He hesitated. I could hear the weight in his voice, the sound of a man who built something real and watched it rot from the inside. You could destroy the company. I could, I said evenly. But I won't. I just want alignment. He paused again, quieter this time. Send me your terms. I already had them drafted. I opened the document labeled realignment_proposal.pdf and read the bullet points aloud. Full licensing agreement for TechFlow to continue using patent hashtag 8,472,639. $15 million upfront payment, 12% ongoing royalties. A one permanent seat on the board of directors with voting privileges. Public acknowledgement of original authorship. Immediate resignation of Stephanie Brooks. There was a long silence on the line, the kind that bends steel. Then Bill said softly, You left out one thing. What's that? An apology. I let the words settle. I don't need one. I just need the correction logged. At 11:42 a.m., an email from TechFlow Legal popped up. Subject, proposed licensing terms. Mr. Caldwell, the board has reviewed your terms. We accept all conditions as outlined. A draft agreement will be forwarded within the hour. That was it. No resistance, no legal posturing, no counteroffer. Just quiet surrender. I leaned back in my chair and stared out the window at the city skyline. Funny how fast power moves when you stop begging for it. Rex nudged my leg, tail thumping softly. I scratched behind his ears. "We did it, buddy," I said, "without a single lawsuit." That afternoon, I got a final text from Paul. "She's gone. Cleaned out her office. Nobody said a word." I pictured her walking out of that glass tower, clutching a designer handbag filled with shattered confidence. Maybe she'd finally understand what optimization feels like from the other side of the table. The next morning, I walked back into TechFlow for the first time since the firing. Same building, different gravity. The security guard who once barely glanced up now stood straighter. The receptionist stammered a "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell." The air itself felt heavier, like everyone could sense the power shift even if they didn't have the vocabulary for it. I took the elevator to the 30th floor. The board conference room was ready. Glass walls polished to a fault, the company logo behind me like a watermark of irony. Bill was there, flanked by 2 directors and a legal counsel who looked like she hadn't slept in days. He gestured to a seat at the table. "Welcome back, Tom. Feels different," I said. He nodded. "It should." The new placard on the table read, "Thomas J. Caldwell, board member, IP architect." Seeing it felt less like victory and more like gravity finding its balance. I didn't gloat, didn't thank them, just looked around the room and said, "We need to fix the culture that made this possible. Starting today, every engineer who contributes core IP gets named authorship. Every patent is reviewed by both legal and technical. No more shadow signatures." They nodded, some reluctantly. Others, like Paul, now promoted to lead engineer, nodded with real conviction. Later that evening, after the papers were signed and the cameras gone, I walked into the old server room. It still smelled faintly of ozone and caffeine. I ran my hand along one of the main racks, tracing the hum of the system that had outlived a dozen CEOs and 3 office remodels. "Still breathing," I whispered. On my way out, I pinned a small metal plate on the wall above the entry door. Just 3 words, laser-etched: "Authorship has value." That night, back home, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, sat on the porch, and watched the city lights blink against the dark. Somewhere downtown, TechFlow was busy rewriting its press release, calling it a strategic partnership instead of what it really was, an apology written in dollars. My phone buzzed once more, an unknown number. The text read, "You didn't have to destroy her, Stephanie." I typed back, "I didn't. You did. I just made sure the record reflected it." Then I powered the phone off. Rex settled beside me, head on my boot, watching the same skyline. The air was still, the kind that follows a storm. Some people call it revenge. I call it market correction. Because when you've spent 28 years building something, you don't burn it down for satisfaction. You just make sure the next sunrise shines on the right name.